Police brutality, angry protesters. We've gotten used to seeing this during the Arab Spring, but now New York. I mean, how far could the correlation go, do you think?
Well, the parallels are obvious, but it does remain to be seen whether this will be transformative in the same way that the Arab Spring was. And I think all protest movements like this tend to start off as a form of political theater, and it remains a question of whether it can transition into something more meaningful. And often it doesn't tend to do that, but as we see now, of course, these protests are not just taking place on Wall Street, but are now starting to spread across the country, which is a sign that there really is something going on here that will start to spread even further. And that's the type of situation that could lead to an American Spring, as it's being dubbed now. But the question really in terms of whether this will be a transformative movement or will still remain at the stage of political theater is whether there can be a coordinated message sent through these protests, or whether it really is just a sort of an uncoordinated bunch of people who have a wide variety of grievances, which of course we find. We
are seeing the minor effects of an avalanche effect spreading across Northern America at the moment. We've just heard reports of more unrest in Boston as well, up on the northeast coast. You mentioned moments ago the issue of political theatre. Now it's a politically sensitive time in Washington. What do you think is going through the minds of the top people there? Surely perhaps the Republicans could use this to square off with President Obama, saying, you see, here's the unrest, the economic woes, your presidency, your term is failing.
I think certainly this will be turned into a form of political infighting as well. But I think what's probably more interesting and more important and potentially transformative about this movement is the fact that they didn't locate this on Washington, or at least not originally. It wasn't Occupy DC, it was Occupy Wall Street, which I think shows the idea that the people are looking past the political theater that's taking place in Washington towards the real praxis of political power, which is located in the heart of the American empire on Wall Street and in the finance capital, not in the where the politicians are wrangling about austerity measures and that sort of thing. Because I think people are becoming more and more aware through the Ron Paul presidential campaign and other sorts of memes that are traveling through society right now that the real heart of the empire is in the finances. So I think that's something that makes this political movement somewhat different and sets it apart. And we see that now being carried out in things like the Federal Reserve protest in Chicago. So there is a chance for this, I think, to become a truly transformative movement centering on the idea of the private banking system in America. Well,
there are many analysts that say that the major governments of the world are just in bed with the big money players, whether it's the banks, whether it's the energy extraction agencies, whether it's the telecommunications or the defense industries. But here we're seeing the police react rather strongly there, as you were saying, outside of Wall Street. What could the consequences be of this? Do you think that people could react in a slightly more aggressive manner?
I see that there could be that possibility of escalation. At this moment, I would say that the momentum and probably the PR win is on the protesters' side, because no one likes to see the police going in and breaking up peaceful protest movements like that. And especially now that we're getting reports that the protesters were actually lured onto the bridge and then trapped. So it's very interesting to watch how this will play out. And I think at this point, as I say, the protesters are probably winning in the PR game. But again, I think there's a much larger political movement at stake here, and it really does remain to be seen whether there can be some sort of coordinated action on the Federal Reserve and the privately owned central banking system of the United States. If
we look back over this past year, for many months indeed, the Eurozone has been struggling in many of its members. Of course, the latest one now to threaten just to blow out the bottom of the entire Eurozone neighborhood is that of Greece, potentially facing bankruptcy in 8 days, a default on billions of euros of loans, and all the while tens of thousands of people protesting as these austerity measures are cast down upon them from the governments, spurned on by the creditors, the main banks. Many people calling in the Eurozone, particularly in Greece, for a total deconstruction and reconstruction of the ruling financial sector. Is that what is needed in the United States of America?
I think that it's quite obvious by this point that the monetary system itself needs reform, but I think if we leave that in the hands of the regulators and the people who have been in charge of the system, they're really just going to try to consolidate more power for themselves. So we see that, for example, playing out in the Eurozone by the European Central Bank arguing for more power rather than less power because they need more power to further consolidate the Eurozone into a coherent whole. That's the argument that they're trying to use. And I think what these protest movements indicate is is an acknowledgement on the people's part that can't be allowed to continue, because if it does, then just more and more of these types of things will continue to happen as the power coalesces into fewer and fewer hands. And as you mentioned before, of course, the Wall Street and the Washington are almost indistinguishable at this point, insofar as the political power is being wielded by Wall Street. So I think this does represent the people's realization that relationship and that nexus is the real enemy, and that in and of itself, I think, makes this a different type of protest movement than one we've seen in recent years.
James Corbett, editor of the independent news website corbettreport.com. Thank you.